standing at Gate K-12 during a record blizzard. I stared at the departed sign while clutching my sister's oversized bags and my father's golf clubs. I had called them 122 times on phones I paid for, but nobody answered. Then I saw my sister's Instagram post a champagne toast to a perfect trip with no drama. Fine. If they wanted a vacation without me, they would get a life without my money too. My name is Hazel Ravenswood, and at 32 years of age, I am the Director of Risk Management at Vanguard Solutions. I am paid a very high salary to predict disasters before they happen, to see the cracks in the foundation that everyone else ignores, and to fortify structures against collapse. Yet, as I stood amidst the swirling chaos of O'Hare International Airport, shivering in a coat that was far too thin for a record-breaking blizzard, I realized I had failed to predict the most obvious catastrophe of my entire life. The sliding glass doors of Gate K-12 rattled violently against the wind. Outside, the world was a void of white and gray, but inside, the air was heavy with the stale heat of anxious travelers and the sharp, metallic taste of my own rising panic. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. My knuckles were white, not from the cold, but from gripping the handle of a heavy luggage cart for 2 hours straight. On that cart sat 3 oversized designer suitcases belonging to my sister, Tiffany, and a set of professional golf clubs belonging to my father. They were heavy, cumbersome objects that I had been ordered to watch. My mind replayed the events of 2 hours ago with agonizing clarity. It was a memory that felt like a physical blow to the stomach. We had arrived at the terminal in a flurry of stress. My mother was complaining about the draft. Tiffany was complaining that the humidity was going to ruin her blowout. My father was barking orders at the Uber driver. I was the one loading the bags onto the carts. I was the one tipping the driver. "Hazel, honey," my mother had said, her voice dripping with that sugary tone she used whenever she needed manual labor. "The line for security is absolutely dreadful. Look at it. It wraps around the corner. We have pre-check," I reminded her. "And we are flying first class. We can use the priority lane." "Yes, but these bags," my father had interrupted, gesturing to the mountain of luggage they had packed for a 1-week trip. "They are overweight. If we go to the counter now, they will make a fuss. I do not have the patience to argue with some minimum wage clerk. You take them to the oversized check-in down at the far end. Wait there. We will go through the VIP lounge entrance. Get settled, and then I will send a porter or come back to get you once we have secured our seats." It sounded plausible. In the Ravenswood family dynamic, I was always the logistics manager. I was the one who handled the messy, heavy, inconvenient details so they could glide through life unbothered. "Give me your passport and your ticket," my mother had added, holding out her manicured hand. "I do not want you losing them in this crowd. You know how clumsy you can be when you are flustered. I will put them in my Birkin for safekeeping." I had handed them over. I had handed over my identity and my passage out of the cold without a second thought. "Don't take too long," Tiffany had chirped, adjusting her sunglasses indoors. "I want to get a mimosa before we board." That was 2 hours ago. Now, the overhead speakers crackled with a sound that made my blood freeze. "Final boarding call for Flight 492 to Miami. Doors are closing." Panic, sharp and electric, spiked in my chest. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My battery was at 12%. I dialed my mother. It rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, then the abrupt click of a decline. I dialed Tiffany. Sent straight to voicemail. I dialed my father. Rejected immediately. I stood there, surrounded by strangers, dialing over and over again. My thumb hit the redial button with mechanical desperation. I counted them in my head. 10 calls, 30 calls, 50 calls. By the time the count reached 122, I was not just calling. I was begging the universe for this to be a mistake. 122 times. The phone on the other end rang or was actively silenced. These were the latest iPhone models. Devices that cost $1,000 each. Devices that were paid for by a direct debit from my personal checking account every month. I abandoned the cart. I ran toward the desk at Gate K-12, my heels clicking frantically against the linoleum. The gate agent, A woman with tired eyes and a tight bun was just unhooking the velvet rope to close the jet bridge. "Wait," I gasped, slamming my hands onto the counter. "Flight 492, I am on that flight." "My family is on that flight." The woman looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "I am sorry, miss. The doors are closed. The aircraft has pushed back." "No, you do not understand," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "My name is Hazel Ravenswood. My parents have my ticket. They have my passport. Please, just check. Are Marcus, Sylvia, and Tiffany Ravenswood on board?" She sighed and tapped a few keys on her terminal. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, but it felt like 5 years. "Yes," she said, her voice softening slightly. 3 passengers under the name Ravenswood boarded 20 minutes ago. Seats 1A, 1B, and 1C. "And 1D?" I asked, breathless. "Hazel Ravenswood, seat 1D. The agent frowned at the screen. She squinted, tapped another key, and then looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was the look one gives to a stray dog that has been kicked in the street. "Miss Ravenswood," she said gently. "Seat 1D was cancelled 45 minutes ago." The world tilted on its axis. "Cancelled?" "Yes. The primary account holder, a Mr. Marcus Ravenswood, requested the cancellation at the VIP service desk. The value of the ticket was converted into a transferable travel credit voucher." I felt the blood drain from my face. My father had not just left me. He had cashed me in. He had looked at my seat, looked at the money it was worth, and decided he would rather have the credit for a future trip than have his daughter on the plane. "I need to make a call," I whispered. "I need to check something." "I cannot let you use the company phone for personal calls," she began, but then she saw the tears welling in my eyes, hot and humiliating. She silently slid her personal cell phone across the counter. My hands shook so badly I could barely type. I did not dial a number. I opened Instagram. I typed in Tiffany's handle. The profile loaded instantly. A new story had been posted 12 minutes ago. I tapped the circle. The image filled the screen. Bright and high definition. It was a selfie. Tiffany was in the foreground, holding a flute of golden champagne. My mother and father were in the background, settled into the plush leather seats of first class, grinning broadly. My mother was wearing her sleep mask on her forehead like a tiara. My father was already looking at the menu, but it was the caption that shattered the last remnants of my denial. "Goodbye, freezing Chicago." Finally, a family trip that is actually perfect. No drama, no extra baggage, just us. Cheers to freedom. No extra baggage. I was the baggage. I handed the phone back to the agent. I did not say thank you. I could not speak. My throat had closed up, choked by a lump of grief so large it felt solid. I turned around and looked at the cart, the golf clubs, the suitcases. They had left them too. They had realized that bringing the oversized items would cost them extra fees or time, so they simply abandoned them, just like they abandoned me. And then another realization hit me like a physical slap. My wallet, my purse was small, a clutch I used for travel. When we were rushing, my mother had offered to put it in her large tote bag. "It will be safer," she had said. "It matches my outfit better if I carry it." I patted my coat pockets. Nothing. I patted my jeans. Nothing. I had no ID. I had no credit cards. I had no cash. I was stranded at O'Hare in a blizzard, miles from my apartment, with $3 in loose change and a phone that was about to die. That night was the longest of my life. The airport was freezing. The heating system struggled against the storm outside, leaving the terminal in a perpetual draft. I found a corner near a vending machine, wedged between the wall and the wall of luggage my family had left behind. I curled up on the thin industrial carpet. It smelled of cleaning chemicals and thousands of footsteps. Around me, other stranded travelers huddled together. I saw a father wrap his jacket around his sleeping daughter. I saw a couple sharing a sandwich, laughing despite the delay. I watched them, and the tears finally came. They were not loud, sobbing tears. They were silent, burning streams that ran down my face and into my ears. I cried for the little girl who used to try so hard to get good grades to make her father smile. I cried for the teenager who took a second job to buy her sister a prom dress. I cried for the woman who had just paid $15,000 for a vacation she was not allowed to attend. I lay there for hours, shivering, my stomach twisting with hunger and nausea. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that Instagram photo, the champagne, the smiles, the relief on their faces that I was not there. But as the gray light of dawn began to filter through the snow-crusted windows, something changed. The tears stopped. The shivering stopped. I sat up. My body was stiff, my muscles aching from the hard floor. But my mind was suddenly crystal clear. It was a clarity I usually only felt when I was staring at a complex spreadsheet, analyzing the potential failure points of a corporate merger. I looked at the golf clubs. I looked at the expensive suitcases. I was Hazel Ravenswood. I managed risk for billion-dollar companies. When an asset became toxic, you did not hold on to it hoping it would improve. You did not cry over it. You liquidated it. You cut your losses, and you eliminated the liability. My family was no longer my family. They were a liability. They were a bad investment that had drained my resources for 32 years. I stood up and smoothed out my wrinkled coat. I wiped the dried salt from my cheeks. My eyes, reflecting in the dark glass of the vending machine, looked different. The softness was gone. The daughter was gone. In her place stood the risk manager, and I was about to conduct the most aggressive audit of their lives. The first step of my new life involved a transaction that made my stomach churn with humiliation. I dragged the 3 suitcases and the golf clubs to a storage locker rental near the baggage claim, paid for a week with the last few coins in my pocket, and then walked out into the biting wind. I needed cash, fast. There was a pawn shop 3 blocks from the terminal shuttle stop, a place with barred windows and a neon sign that buzzed with the sound of dying electricity. I placed my vintage Cartier tank watch on the scratched glass counter. It was a gift to myself when I made director, worth at least $4,000 on the resale market. The man behind the counter, who smelled of stale tobacco and indifference, looked at it and then at me. He saw the red eyes, the disheveled hair, and the desperate set of my jaw. He knew he had the leverage. $1,500. He grunted. I did not haggle. I did not have the energy to explain the provenance or the gold content. I took the $1,500 bills, shoved them into my pocket, and walked out without looking back. That watch measured time, and I had just learned that my time meant absolutely nothing to the people who were supposed to love me. The taxi ride back to the city was a blur of gray slush and red taillights. When the cab finally pulled up to my building, a sleek high-rise in the Gold Coast district, I felt no sense of relief. This was the apartment I had bought 3 years ago. It was my sanctuary. But as I opened the door, the smell hit me first. It was not the scent of lavender and bergamot I usually kept in the diffusers. It was the smell of half-eaten pizza, stale coffee, and heavy perfume. My family had stayed here the night before the flight because it was closer to the airport than their house in the suburbs. They had treated my living room like a frat house. There were wet towels flung over my Italian leather sofa. Takeout boxes were stacked on my glass coffee table, grease seeping into the expensive rug. A half-drunk glass of milk sat on the edge of the mantel, leaving a white ring on the wood. They had used my home as a waiting room, trashed it, and left. I locked the door and slid down against it until I hit the floor. The adrenaline that had sustained me at the airport finally evaporated, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. My head pounded. My throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. I crawled to the sofa, pushed a greasy pizza box onto the floor, and collapsed. For the next 2 days, I did not move. The fever took me. It was a violent, shivering heat that made the room spin. I lay there in my coat, drifting in and out of consciousness. I was too weak to get water, too nauseous to eat. My phone, plugged into the charger on the wall, buzzed incessantly with notifications, but I ignored them. In my fever dreams, I was back at the airport, screaming, but no sound came out. I saw my mother's face, not smiling, but sneering. I saw my father swinging a golf club at my head. When I was awake, the torture was digital. I would scroll through social media with burning eyes. There was Tiffany, posting a video of herself dancing on a table at a club in South Beach. There was my mother, holding a giant crab claw at a 5-star seafood restaurant. There was my father, smoking a cigar on a private balcony overlooking the ocean. They looked radiant. They looked unburdened. They did not look like people who had lost a daughter. They looked like people who had finally gotten rid of a pest. On the afternoon of the third day, the sound of a key turning in the lock jolted me awake. Only one other person had a key to my apartment. Elena walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. She was a corporate litigator, sharp as a whip and twice as dangerous, with a bob cut that could cut glass. She stopped dead in the hallway when she saw the mess, and then she saw me. "Hazel," she gasped, dropping the bags. She rushed over, her cool hand instantly finding my burning forehead. "You are burning up. My God. Look at this place. I thought you were in Miami." "I am not in Miami," I croaked, my voice a ruin. Elena wasted no time. She forced me to drink water. She found aspirin. She cleaned the trash off the sofa and sat beside me. Her face grim. "Talk," she commanded. I told her everything. The bags, the fake ticket cancellation, the 122 calls, the silence. Elena listened without interrupting. As a lawyer, she was used to hearing horrific stories, but I saw her jaw tighten until a muscle popped in her cheek. "Show me the phone," she said. She pulled up Instagram on her own device and navigated to Tiffany's profile. "Look at this. She just went live an hour ago." She pressed play. Tiffany's face filled the screen, filtered to perfection, with the ocean breeze blowing through her hair. She was holding the camera selfie style while my mother sat next to her, sipping a mojito. "Hey guys," Tiffany chirped. "Just wanted to update you all. We are having a blast. Sad news though. My big sis, Hazel, could not make it. She is such a workaholic. You know, at the last minute, she got this huge project and insisted on staying back to handle it. She literally forced us to go without her. We miss you. Hazel." My mother leaned into the frame, putting on a sad, martyr-like expression. "Yes, we are heartbroken, but we are trying to have fun for her sake. She works too hard. A poor thing." Elena paused the video. The silence in the room was deafening. "They are lying," I whispered. "They are rewriting history." Elena looked at me, her dark eyes analyzing the situation with terrifying precision. "Hazel, who paid for this trip I did?" I said, "Every cent. The first-class tickets. The presidential suite at the Ritz, the rental car, the daily stipend for food. It was their 30th wedding anniversary gift. It cost me nearly $50,000. Elena nodded slowly. "And last week, did you have a fight with them, specifically with Tiffany?" I blinked, trying to recall through the fog of my fever. "Yes. She wanted a new car. Her lease was up on the BMW I co-signed for. She wanted the new Range Rover. I told her no. I told her I could not afford to carry another $600 monthly payment for her when I was already paying the mortgage on Mom and Dad's house." Elena sat back, crossing her arms. "There it is. What? This is not forgetfulness. Hazel, this is not an accident. This is punishment." I stared at her. "They are punishing you for closing the wallet," Elena said, her voice cold and factual. "You said no to the Range Rover, so they decided to remind you of your place. They took the trip you paid for, left you behind to suffer, and are now publicly humiliating you to ensure you feel isolated. They want you to break. They want you to call them, begging for forgiveness, ready to buy that car just to be let back into the fold." The realization hit me harder than the fever. I was not a daughter, I was a utility. I was at an ATM that had malfunctioned, and they were kicking it until it dispensed cash again. Suddenly, my phone on the coffee table lit up. It was a text message from my bank. "Alert. Transaction authorized. $5,240 at Lorenzo Jewelers, Miami. Reply yes. To confirm or no if fraud." I stared at the number, $5,000, in a jewelry store. While I lay here on a couch reeking of their garbage, recovering from hypothermia. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a bridge collapsing under too much weight. The fever seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, sharp rage that clarified everything. I picked up the phone. I looked at the notification. "They are holding my secondary card," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "My mother has it for emergencies. Apparently, diamond earrings are an emergency." "Hazel," Elena warned, watching my face. "What are you going to do? Do not do anything rash. We can sue them for the cost of the trip." But I tossed the phone onto the cushion next to me. I stood up. I felt dizzy, but I locked my knees and forced myself to stand tall. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Gray and brutal and honest. "I am not going to sue them for the trip." "Elena," I said softly, "that is small thinking. That is what a hurt daughter does." I turned back to look at her. They want to play games. They want to pretend I do not exist until the bill comes, fine. I walked to my desk and sat down in my ergonomic chair. I woke up to my computer monitors. The blue light washed over my face, illuminating the dark circles under my eyes. "Holidays are over," I said, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Do they like playing the victim? I will give them a reason to cry that is actually real." I opened a blank spreadsheet. I named it Project Zero. Elena smiled. A sharp, predatory grin. She pulled up a chair beside me. "Where do we start?" she asked. I looked at the bank notification one last time before deleting it. "We start by turning off the lights." The glow of three 49-inch curved monitors bathed my living room in a sterile blue light. I had showered, washed away the grime of the airport floor, and dressed not in pajamas, but in my sharpest silk blouse and trousers. One does not conduct a hostile takeover in a bathrobe. I cracked my knuckles and opened a fresh Excel workbook. I named the file simply Audit Ravenswood Insolvency, XLSX. For the last decade, I had treated my family's finances with a hands-off approach, automatically paying bills as they arrived to avoid conflict. I had classified these expenses in my mind as the cost of love. Now, I was reclassifying them as embezzlement. I began to import the data: 5 years of bank statements, credit card histories, and Venmo transactions populated the screen in thousands of tiny rows. I used a pivot table to categorize the hemorrhage. Row 4 mortgage, parental residence, $3,500 a month. Row 5 rent, Tiffany's apartment Lincoln Park, $2,800 a month. Row 6 automotive insurance, multi-car policy, $400. Row 7 Oak Haven Country Club, membership dues, $600. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the data with the detached precision of a surgeon looking for a tumor. The smaller charges were like parasites: Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Spotify Family Plan, Amazon Prime, HBO Max. They had subscribed to every streaming service in existence, all linked to my email, all charged to my debit card. Then there was the food: Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub. I filtered by Tiffany Ravenswood. The sheer volume was staggering. There were charges for sushi, artisan burgers, and organic smoothie bowls. Sometimes 3 times a day, I clicked on a specific transaction from last month. Uber ride, $45. The destination was a trendy nightclub downtown. The note attached to the expense in the shared family ledger app read, "Job interview transport." I snorted. A job interview at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I cross-referenced other rides. Trips to her ex-boyfriend's house were labeled networking events. Trips to the mall were labeled office supply run. She had been treating my bank account like a corporate expense card, and I was the oblivious CEO approving every fraudulent receipt. But then, I found the anomaly. It was in the long-term liabilities tab, a recurring deduction of $800 labeled servicing, SB Loan 442. I frowned. I did not have a small business loan. My student loans were paid off. My car was bought outright. I logged into the National Credit Bureau database, using my security clearance credentials to bypass the usual wait times. I pulled my full credit report. There it was, A $50,000 small business loan taken out 18 months ago for a company called Marcus Ventures, LLC. Status delinquent. Guarantor, Hazel Ravenswood. I downloaded the original loan application. My eyes widened as I zoomed in on the signature line. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting. But the loop on the R was wrong. It was too flourishing. It was my father's handwriting, trying to be mine. He had forged my electronic signature. He had taken out a loan in my name to fund some failed scheme he never told me about, and he had been using the allowance I gave him to make the minimum payments until recently. He had missed the last two. This was not just leeching. This was a felony. Identity theft. Bank fraud. I sat back, the cold fury in my chest solidifying into a block of ice. I did not scream. I did not cry. In risk management, when you identify a systemic failure, you do not get emotional. You initiate a containment protocol. I typed a new header at the top of my spreadsheet, Project Zero. I picked up my landline. My cell phone was still off, and I had no intention of turning it on. I dialed the platinum service line for my bank. Vanguard Elite Banking. This is Sarah. How may I assist you? Ms. Ravenswood. Hello, Sarah, I said, my voice smooth and professional. I need to report a security breach. My secondary black card ending in 4599 is currently in the possession of an unauthorized user in Miami. Oh no, Sarah said. Shall I freeze it? Do not just freeze it, I commanded. Mark it as stolen. Cancel the number entirely. I want any attempt to use that physical card to trigger a do not honor code immediately. And Sarah, I want to contest the last transaction for $5,000 at a jewelry store. That was not authorized by me. Understood. The card is dead as of this second. The fraud investigation team will open a file. Thank you. Also, please remove that card from all digital wallets associated with it. Step 1 complete. The oxygen was cut. I turned to the second monitor. I logged into the Ritz-Carlton guest portal. Since I had booked the reservation, I had full administrative access. I could see their itinerary. They had ordered room service 20 minutes ago, 3 lobster thermidors, and a bottle of Dom Perignon. I went to the billing and payment section. My primary credit card was listed as the guarantee method. I clicked Edit. I deleted the card information. The system prompted me to add a new card to maintain the reservation. I did not add one. I simply saved the changes. In the hotel industry, the system runs an authorization check every night or whenever the bill exceeds a certain threshold. With the lobster dinner they just ordered, their bill was about to hit that limit. When the front desk tried to authorize the charge, they would find a vacuum. Step 2 complete. The shelter was compromised. I moved to the third monitor. This was the pettiest move, but perhaps the most crippling for a family addicted to appearances. I logged into Apple's website. We shared a family sharing plan for iCloud storage, which meant I was the administrator. I clicked on Manage Family. I selected Tiffany Ravenswood. Clicked Remove. I selected Marcus Ravenswood. Clicked Remove. I selected Sylvia Ravenswood. Clicked Remove. Then, I went a step further. Because I had set up their phones years ago, I knew the passwords to their individual Apple IDs. They never changed them because they claimed technology was too confusing. I logged into my father's account. I changed the password. I selected Sign Out of All Devices. I did the same for my mother. I did the same for Tiffany. In Miami, 3 iPhones would suddenly go black. They would ask for a password that no longer worked. They would lose access to their contacts, their photos, their saved credit cards in Apple Pay, and most importantly, their social media apps. Step 3. Complete. Communications severed. Finally, I opened a drafting software I used for legal contracts. I began typing a formal notice of severance and demand for repayment. I was not just cutting them off, I was disentangling my legal soul from theirs. I drafted affidavits stating that the signature on the Marcus Ventures loan was a forgery. I attached the handwriting analysis comparison I had just performed using my own samples. I called a contact of mine, a shark of a private investigator named Mike, who owed me a favor from a corporate espionage case last year. Mike, I said when he picked up, I need a process server in Miami. Someone aggressive. I have a family staying at the Ritz-Carlton who needs to be served with legal notices regarding identity theft and eviction. Eviction? Mike asked. I own the house they live in back in Chicago, I said calmly. There is no lease. They are tenants at will. I am terminating the tenancy effective immediately. You are evicting your parents. I am evicting squatters who stole my identity, I corrected him. Can you get someone to the Ritz by tomorrow morning? Consider it done. I hung up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I felt a strange sensation. It was not guilt. It was power. For 32 years, I had been the safety net, catching them every time they fell, absorbing every shock so they could live in a fantasy world. I had been the structure that held them up. Now, I was removing the pillars. A notification pinged on my email. It was an automated message from the Ritz-Carlton reservation system. Subject urgent. Payment method declined. Dear guest, we were unable to authorize the guarantee card on file for your presidential suite. The outstanding balance is $12,400. Please visit the front desk immediately to provide an alternative payment method to avoid lockout. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of the lukewarm water on my desk. A smile, slow and sharp as a blade, spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled in 3 days. Enjoy the lobster, I whispered to the empty room. It is the last meal you are ever going to eat on my dime. The silence in my apartment was luxurious. For the first time in 4 days, the air did not smell like my sister's cheap vanilla body spray or my father's cigars. I sat on my freshly cleaned sofa, a glass of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon in one hand and the remote control in the other. I was watching a documentary about predators in the Serengeti. It felt thematic. My phone, which I had finally turned back on but kept on silent, lay on the coffee table. It had been dormant for hours, a black monolith of peace. Then, at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, the screen lit up. It was my mother. I did not reach for it. I did not flinch. I simply took a slow sip of wine and watched the screen pulse. The name Mom flashed urgently. Desperate to bridge the 1,000 miles between Chicago and Miami, I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 2 seconds later, it rang again, then again. Then came the texts. I watched them pop up on the lock screen like frantic little bubbles rising in boiling water. Hazel, pick up. The card is not working. Hazel. There must be a mistake with the bank. Call them now. The waiter is standing here. This is humiliating. Fix it. I chuckled softly. The image was vivid in my mind. They had probably just finished that lobster thermidor. My father would be patting his stomach, signaling for the check with that arrogant snap of his fingers he used on service workers. My mother would be checking her lipstick in a compact mirror. Tiffany would be scrolling through her feed, ignoring them both. Then the card would be declined. The waiter would return. Voice lowered discreetly but firm. My father would bluster. He would try again. Declined. My phone started buzzing continuously now. It was vibrating so hard it was slowly inching across the table. Are you there? The manager is here. They are saying the card is reported stolen. Hazel. Pick up the damn phone. I unpaused the documentary. A lioness was taking down a gazelle. Efficient, merciless. 10 minutes later, a different number appeared on my screen. It was a Florida area code. I recognized the prefix. It was the Ritz-Carlton General line. I picked up this one. Hello? I said, my voice crisp and pleasant. Ms. Ravenswood. A male voice, deep and serious. This is Mr. Vance, head of security at the Ritz-Carlton South Beach. I am calling you because you are listed as the emergency contact and primary booking agent for the guests in the presidential suite. Oh, yes, I said. Is there a problem? Are they injured? No, ma'am, but we have a situation regarding payment. The credit card on file has been flagged as fraudulent and deactivated. The guests, Mr. and Mrs. Ravenswood, are currently unable to provide an alternative method of payment for their outstanding balance, which is substantial. They are claiming you will sort this out. I swirled the wine in my glass. Mr. Vance, Let me be very clear. I reported that card stolen because I am not in Miami. I am in Chicago. Any charges made on that card in the last 4 days were unauthorized. As for the guests, they are 3 capable adults. I assume they can pay for their own vacation. There was a pause on the line. I could hear shouting in the background. It sounded like my father screaming. Do you know who I am? They are claiming they have no access to funds, Mr. Vance said, his tone shifting from professional courtesy to law enforcement suspicion. Ms. Ravenswood, if this bill is not settled, we will have to involve the local authorities. The bill currently exceeds $12,000. That sounds like a civil matter between the hotel and the occupants, I said coolly. I'm not paying for it. I suggest you check their luggage. I believe they have quite a few designer items that might cover the cost of the minibar. We have already secured their luggage as collateral, Mr. Vance said. We are escorting them off the premises as we speak. I just wanted to confirm you are refusing liability. I am refusing liability, I confirmed. Good luck, Mr. Vance. I hung up. The notifications on my phone exploded. Tiffany, you psycho. They are kicking us out. Tiffany. They took my bags. My clothes are in there. My makeup, Tiffany. Mom is crying. Dad is going to have a heart attack, Tiffany. Send money right now, or I swear to God I will kill you. I typed a single reply to Tiffany. My fingers flew across the screen with satisfying precision. Me. Remember that travel voucher you got when you canceled my ticket to get a refund? Use that to pay for a motel. I hit send. The ... of her typing appeared instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was too incoherent with rage to type. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. It was my father. I put the phone on speaker and set it back on the table. Hazel. His voice was distorted, breathless, shaking with a fury I had not heard since I was 16 and crashed his car. You listen to me, you ungrateful little wretch. We are standing on the sidewalk. The sidewalk. Do you hear me? People are looking at us. You fix this right now. You call the bank, you call the hotel, and you apologize. If you do not transfer $10,000 to my account in the next 5 minutes, you are no daughter of mine. I will disown you. I will cut you out of the will. Do you hear me? You are dead to us. The message ended with a click. I laughed. It was a loud, genuine laugh that echoed off the walls of my empty apartment. He was threatening to cut me out of a will that consisted entirely of debt. He was threatening to disown the only person keeping him from bankruptcy. I poured myself another glass of wine. According to the GPS data, I could still see because while I had kicked them out of their Apple IDs, I had not removed the tracking software I installed on their devices for safety. They were currently moving away from the ocean. They were heading inland. They stopped 20 minutes later at a place called the Flamingo Inn. I looked it up on my laptop. It was a 2-star motel next to a highway overpass. The reviews mentioned thin walls, stains on the carpet, and a vending machine that only accepted quarters. It was perfect. They had no luggage, only the clothes on their backs. They had no credit cards that worked. They likely had to scrape together whatever cash they had in their pockets just to afford a single room with 2 double beds for 3 people. But my work for the night was not done. I minimized the browser and opened a new tab. I typed in the URL for the smart home system I had installed in my parents' house 2 years ago. Welcome, administrator. I saw the status of their home in the Chicago suburbs. Temperature 72 degrees, front door locked, security system armed. It was currently minus 10 degrees outside in Chicago. The blizzard was still raging. I clicked on the climate control tab. I adjusted the thermostat. I dragged the little circle from 72 down to 50, just enough to keep the pipes from bursting, but cold enough to be miserable. Then I went to the access tab. My parents used a keypad to enter their front door. The code was their anniversary date, 1993. I clicked change passcode. I typed in a new 4-digit code, 0000. I hit save. Then I disabled the remote access feature for all other users. I leaned back, watching the little spinning wheel confirm the changes. When they finally crawled back from Miami, bruised and battered, they would find their sanctuary barred to them. They would be standing in the snow, punching in their anniversary date over and over again, just like I had dialed their numbers 122 times. They would be cold, they would be locked out, and they would know, with absolute certainty, that the daughter they forgot at the airport had finally remembered who she was. I took a final sip of wine, turned off the TV, and went to bed. I slept like a baby. The return trip for the Ravenswood family was, by all accounts, a masterclass in karmic justice, because they had no credit cards and only the travel voucher I had forced them to use. They could not book a direct flight on a major carrier. Instead, they flew on a budget airline known for its cramped seats and aggressive hidden fees. They had a layover in Atlanta. They sat in the last row, right next to the lavatories, in middle seats, separated from one another. I knew this because I was still tracking them, but I did not need a tracker to know they had landed at O'Hare. I knew it because my phone, which had been relatively quiet during their flight, suddenly exploded. It started with a notification from Facebook, then Instagram, then TikTok. I opened the app and there was Tiffany. She was standing in the baggage claim area, looking disheveled. Her mascara was smeared artfully under her eyes, and she was wearing a hoodie that looked performatively cheap. She was alive. Guys, I do not even know where to start. She sobbed into the camera, wiping a non-existent tear. We just got back. It was a nightmare. My sister, my own sister, she hacked my dad's bank accounts. She drained everything while we were in the air. She left us in Miami with $0. We had to beg for water. We slept in a motel with roaches. Comments flooded the screen. OMG, that is evil, sue her. What kind of monster does that to their parents? Tiffany sniffed, looking directly into the lens. She is a high-powered executive, you know. She thinks because she has money she can control us. She is abusive. Financial abuse is real. Guys, I stared at the screen. My coffee cup suspended halfway to my mouth. The audacity was breathtaking. She was projecting her own behavior onto me with such precision that psychologists could have used it as a case study. Then came the second wave. My mother joined the fray. She posted a photo on her Facebook wall. It was a screenshot of our text conversation from yesterday, but she had cropped it. She had cut out her demands, her insults, and her threats. All that remained was her text saying, "Please, we are hungry and have nowhere to sleep." And my response, "Use the voucher." Her caption read, "I never thought I would raise a child who would look at her starving mother and laugh. Money really does change people." Heartbroken, the flying monkeys arrived within minutes. My aunt, who I had not spoken to in 3 years, messaged me, "How could you? Your father has high blood pressure." My cousin, who owed me $500, commented, "Disgusting behavior. You should be ashamed." I did not reply. I did not block them. I screenshotted everything, every lie, every threat, every libelous comment. I saved them into a folder named Defamation Evidence, but the internet does not stay on the internet. At 2:00 in the afternoon, I was summoned to the Human Resources Department at Vanguard Solutions. My boss, the VP of Operations, was there, along with the Director of HR. They looked uncomfortable. "Hazel," the HR director began, sliding a tablet across the desk. "We have received a disturbingly high volume of emails and social media tags in the last 4 hours regarding your personal conduct." On the screen was Tiffany's video. It had 40,000 views. "We do not typically involve ourselves in private family matters," my boss said, looking at his hands. "But the accusations involve financial fraud and hacking. Given your position as Director of Risk Management, this touches on our integrity. People are tagging Vanguard, asking if we employ hackers." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of professional calm. This was their strategy. They knew they could not hurt me financially, so they were trying to destroy my career. "This is a smear campaign," I said, my voice steady. "My sister is upset because I stopped paying her bills. There was no hacking. There was no fraud. I simply closed the credit cards that were in my name." "The optics are bad." "Hazel," the HR director said. "She claims you abandoned them." "I did not abandon them," I said. "I was the one abandoned." I pulled out my company-issued phone. I placed it on the desk. I would like to formally request that the IT department pull the GPS logs and call history from this device for the date of December 24th. I stated, the data will show that I was at O'Hare Airport for 4 hours. It will show 122 outgoing calls to my family, none of which were answered. It will prove that they boarded the plane and left me there. I am the victim of the abandonment, not the perpetrator. My boss looked up, surprised by my conviction. You want us to audit your phone? I insist on it, I said. And once the data corroborates my story, I will be filing a cease and desist order against my sister for defamation. I will not let my family's extortion attempts damage this firm's reputation. They exchanged a look. Very well, the HR director said. We will pull the logs. Go back to work. Hazel, but keep a low profile. I walked back to my office, my blood boiling. They had crossed the line. They had brought the war to my sanctuary. Meanwhile, the GPS tracker on my father's phone showed they had finally arrived at the house in the suburbs. It was 10 degrees below zero in Chicago. The wind chill was deadly. I watched the dot on the map sit in the driveway for 10 minutes. Then it moved to the front door. Then it stayed there. I could imagine the scene. My father punched in 1993. The red light flashing. Him punching it in again. My mother was shivering in her thin Miami clothes. Tiffany screamed. They tried the garage code. I had changed that too. 15 minutes later, I received a notification from the smart home security system, glass break sensor triggered, living room window. They had broken into their own home. I switched the camera feed on my laptop. The system ran on a dedicated cellular backup, independent of the house's Wi-Fi. The video was grainy in the low light, but I could see them climbing through the shattered window, snow blowing into the living room behind them. My father stood up, brushing glass off his coat. He reached for the light switch. He flipped it. Nothing happened. He flipped it again. Nothing. I watched him pull out his phone and use the flashlight. He walked to the thermostat. The display was blank. What is going on? I heard my mother wail through the camera's microphone. Why is it so cold? Why are the lights not working? The power is out, my father growled. Check the Wi-Fi, Tiffany shrieked. I need to upload part 2. There is no Wi-Fi if there is no power. You idiot, my father yelled back. But it was not just a power outage. I had called the utility company 2 days ago. I had called the water company. I had called the internet provider. Since all the accounts were in my name because I had set them up when they moved in and they had never bothered to switch them, I had the right to cancel service. I had scheduled the disconnection for today. They were standing in a freezing house with a broken window letting in the blizzard. No heat, no water, no internet, and no way to charge their dying phones. Tiffany, however, had enough battery left for one final act of malice. Since she could not use the home Wi-Fi, she must have used her remaining cellular data. A notification popped up on my phone. I had been tagged in a post in a local Chicago Facebook group called Bad People of Chicago. The post contained my full name. It contained my home address. It contained my personal cell phone number. This is the woman who left her elderly parents to freeze. Tiffany wrote, She lives here in luxury while we suffer. Someone needs to teach her a lesson. Do your thing. Internet. Doxing. She had just doxed me. At 7 o'clock that evening, the first call came from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a man's voice, heavy and breathing hard. We know where you live. Rich bitch. Watch your back. At 7:15, a pizza delivery arrived at my door. I had not ordered pizza. The delivery driver demanded $50. I sent him away. At 8 o'clock, my phone began to ring nonstop. Texts poured in, pictures of dead animals, threats of violence, detailed descriptions of what they wanted to do to me. I sat in the dark of my apartment, the glow of the city outside my window offering no comfort. The fear was cold and sharp in my gut. This was no longer just a financial dispute. They had weaponized strangers against me. They had put my physical safety at risk because I refused to be their wallet. I looked at the phone, vibrating with hatred. Okay, I said to the empty room. You want to involve the public. You want to involve the law. I stood up and walked to my safe. I dialed the combination. Inside was a hard drive containing every financial record, every forged document, and the video files I had downloaded from the security cameras. I took out the hard drive. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. And unlike Tiffany's sloppy, emotional outbursts, my strike would be surgical, legal, and absolutely terminal. The first thing I did was erase myself. Within 2 hours of the doxing incident, my old phone number was dead. I had a new, unlisted line, encrypted and shared only with Elena and my boss. But digital walls were not enough when people were threatening to burn down my apartment. By 8 o'clock the next morning, a man named Goliath, a 6'5" former distinct military contractor, was standing outside my front door. I had hired him through a private security firm Vanguard Solutions used for executive protection. He did not smile. He did not ask questions. He simply crossed his massive arms and became a human wall between me and the world. Safely behind that wall, Elena and I turned my dining room table into a war room. "They went low," Elena said, sorting through a stack of printed screenshots. "They went so low they are in the sewer, so we are going to bury them there." We spent 4 hours compiling a dossier titled The Statement of Facts. It was not an emotional rant. It was a forensic dissection of the last week, supported by 3 pieces of irrefutable evidence. First, Exhibit A. The airport security footage. Being the director of risk management for a major corporation meant I had contacts. I had called the head of security at O'Hare, a man I had helped audit 2 years ago. I told him I needed footage to prove I was not a missing person. He sent me the clip. It showed my family laughing as they walked through the VIP line, me running up to the desk, and me collapsing on the floor when the plane departed. Second, Exhibit B. A redacted summary of my bank statements for the last 5 years. It showed the outflows, the mortgage payments, the car payments, the tuition for Tiffany's acting classes that she never attended. The total sum was over $500,000. Third, Exhibit C. The audio file of my father's voicemail from the night before, the one where he threatened to disown me if I did not wire him $10,000. I did not post this on TikTok. I was not an influencer chasing clout. I was a professional defending my reputation. I logged into LinkedIn. I also cross-posted to my personal Facebook page, which I unlocked for public viewing for exactly 1 hour. I titled the post, "Regarding the recent allegations of abandonment and fraud." I attached the files. I wrote a single paragraph: "I have been accused of abandoning my family and stealing their funds." The attached security footage shows who actually abandoned whom. The attached financial records show who has supported this family for a decade. The attached audio recording reveals the true nature of their grievance. I stopped paying. Facts do not require filters. I hit post. Then I sat back and watched the tide turn. The internet is a fickle beast. It loves a villain, but it loves a receipt even more. Within 30 minutes, the comments on Tiffany's viral video began to shift. "Wait, did you see Hazel's post? She paid for everything. You guys are moochers. OMG? Listen to the voicemail. The dad is a psycho. You left your sister at the airport in a blizzard and then demanded money. The Bad People of Chicago group took down Tiffany's post and banned her account for doxing. Then came the corporate fallout for Tiffany. She was a micro-influencer who had a few brand deals with a detox tea company and a fast fashion label. I watched in real time as the fashion label tagged her in a tweet, "We do not condone bullying or exploitation. Effective immediately. We are severing ties with Tiffany Ravenswood." Tiffany's phone, which she had evidently charged by plugging it into her car, started blowing up my old number, which was now disconnected. She was screaming into the void, but I was not done. Elena pulled a fresh document from her briefcase. It was printed on thick, legal bond paper. "Ready for the kinetic strike?" she asked. "Send it," I said. It was a demand for repayment. We were not suing for emotional damages. We were suing for unjust enrichment and breach of verbal contract. We cataloged the home repairs I had paid for under the promise of reimbursement that never came. We cataloged the car I had bought in my name, which they used exclusively. The total came to $150,000. The letter was simple remit payment in full within 30 days, or we will initiate proceedings to seize assets, including the foreclosure of the property at parents' address to satisfy the debt. A process server delivered it to them at noon. At 2 o'clock, the lobby security desk at Vanguard Solutions called me. "Ms. Ravenswood," the guard said, sounding nervous. "Your mother is here. She is making a scene." I switched my monitor to the lobby security feed. There she was. My mother, Sylvia Ravenswood, was wearing a coat she had clearly pulled out of storage because her Miami clothes were freezing. She was crying loudly, clutching her chest, staggering around the marble floor of the reception area. "My daughter," she wailed to the receptionist. "I just want to see my daughter. She is killing me, my heart." Then, with the theatrical grace of a soap opera extra, she collapsed onto the floor. She lay there, checking through slit eyes to see if anyone was rushing to help. People stopped. Employees looked concerned. The receptionist reached for the phone to call 911. "Do not call the paramedics," I told the guard through the phone. "She is faking it. She did this when I graduated college to get attention. She did this at my cousin's wedding." "What do you want us to do, ma'am? She is on the floor. Is she blocking the turnstiles?" "Yes." "Then she is trespassing and obstructing business operations," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Escort her out. If she refuses to walk, carry her. If she resists, call the police." I watched on the screen as 2 large security officers approached my mother. As soon as they touched her arms to lift her, her heart attack miraculously cured itself. She scrambled to her feet, screaming that she would sue the company, that she was a victim, that her daughter was a devil. They marched her out the revolving doors and onto the snowy sidewalk. I saved the video clip. I attached it to a text message. I sent it to my father's number. Text: "Next time she comes to my place of business, I will have her arrested for disorderly conduct and harassment. I am not your daughter anymore. I am your creditor. You have 29 days left." I put the phone down. For years, my father had viewed me as a resource, a golden goose that laid eggs whenever he demanded. He thought he could starve the goose, beat the goose, and leave the goose in the cold, and it would still produce. Now, as he sat in his freezing dark house, reading that text, he was finally realizing the truth. The goose had not just stopped laying, the goose had grown talons, and it was coming for the rest of the farm. The silence of my apartment was deceptive. Outside these walls, the ecosystem of the Ravenswood family was collapsing with the speed and violence of a controlled demolition. Without my capital injection, the reality of their existence crashed down upon them. It started with the mail. My father had always ignored the mailbox, preferring to let me sort through the envelopes and pay the ones with red lettering. Now, I imagined the pile growing like a tumor in their entryway. Final notices, utility disconnection warnings, credit card delinquency alerts. The interest rates were predatory, and without my credit score to shield them, the creditors were circling. The first public casualty was Tiffany. I received the details from a mutual acquaintance, a former college friend who had happened to be at the same coffee shop in Lincoln Park where Tiffany held court. Tiffany had driven her BMW X5 there to meet her boyfriend, a hedge fund associate named Chad who cared very much about optics. Tiffany had been sipping an oat milk latte, probably complaining about how I had ruined her life, when the tow truck backed up to the curb. The repo man did not care about her Instagram following. He did not care about her tears. He had a work order. I had prepaid the lease on that car for a year. When I initiated Project Zero, I contacted the dealership and revoked the prepayment, applying the refund to the principal of my own mortgage. That left the account in arrears for 3 months immediately. My friend described the scene with relish. Tiffany screamed that it was a mistake. The hook lifts the front bumper, the alarm blaring. And then, the coup de grace. Chad, watching his girlfriend's luxury SUV being dragged away like roadkill, checked his watch. He did not offer to pay. He did not offer a ride. He realized that the heiress he was dating was actually a fraud with a credit score in the double digits. He broke up with her on the sidewalk while the barista watched. Tiffany walked home in the snow. Then came the rage. My father, Marcus, did not handle humiliation well. He handled it with scotch. At 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, my burner phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the recording immediately. Hazel, he slurred, the wet or heavy sound of alcohol thickening his tongue. You think you are smart? You think you are safe in that ivory tower of yours I made you? I can unmake you. I am coming down there. I am going to come to your office, and I am going to teach you a lesson you will never forget. You are messing with the wrong man. It was a threat. A credible, violent threat. I forwarded the audio file to Goliath, my bodyguard, and then I forwarded it to Mike, the private investigator I had retained. Dig deeper, I told Mike the next morning. He is desperate. Desperate men have secrets they are trying to hide. I want to know why he needed that $50,000 loan he forged my name on. Mike's report came back 48 hours later, and it was devastating. It was not just a bad business deal. My father had been funneling money into an offshore gambling site. Worse, he had been cooking the books on his taxes for 5 years, claiming me as a dependent long after I was 30 years old to get deductions, and hiding income he made from selling consulting services that looked suspiciously like money laundering for local bookies. I filed the evidence in my safe. This was the nuclear option. If I went to the IRS, he would not just be bankrupt, he would be in federal prison. While my father chose aggression, my mother, Sylvia, chose psychological warfare. She began emailing me. She could not text me, so she used an old email address I hadn't deactivated. The subject lines were innocuous. Thinking of you. Or remember this inside were scanned photographs. There was a 5-year-old me in a tutu, 7-year-old me blowing out candles, 10-year-old me holding her hand at the zoo. We loved you so much, she wrote. We gave you everything. How can you throw away family money? Money is just paper. Hazel, blood is forever. Please come home. We forgive you. Forgive me. The narcissism was breathtaking. I looked at a photo of a 10-year-old me. I remembered that day at the zoo. I remembered that they had forgotten to pack me lunch, so I watched them eat hot dogs while I drank water from a fountain. I did not reply with words. I opened my digital archives. I found a scanned document from 14 years ago. It was an invoice from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Patient Hazel Ravenswood, age 18, procedure emergency appendectomy, balance, due $22,000. I remembered waking up in that recovery room, alone, in agonizing pain. My parents were in Cabo San Lucas. When I had called them to say my stomach hurt, they told me to stop being dramatic and hung up. I had driven myself to the ER, passing out in the parking lot. The nurses had to call a distant aunt to sign the consent forms because my parents refused to cut their vacation short. I had paid that bill myself. It took me 6 years of working 2 jobs while in college. I attached the invoice to the reply email. I wrote a single line I raised myself from the moment I woke up in this hospital room alone. Do not talk to me about blood. You only like my blood when you are sucking it. The silence from her end was immediate, but the reprieve was short-lived. Since individual tactics were failing, they decided to mobilize the infantry. On Sunday afternoon, I was reading a book in my living room when the buzzer for the lobby began to ring. It rang continuously, a jagged, angry sound. I checked the camera feed. It was not just my parents. It was the clan, my Uncle Jerry, my Aunt Linda, 2 cousins, and my parents were standing in the vestibule of my apartment building. They were not there for a visit. They were a lynch mob in winter coats. They were pressing the buzzer for every unit in the building, trying to get someone to let them in. Hazel, Uncle Jerry bellowed, his face pressed against the glass. We know you are up there. Come down and face your father. Ungrateful brat? Aunt Linda screamed. My neighbors were coming out of their units, annoyed. The doorman, a sturdy man named Henry, who I tipped very well at Christmas, was trying to hold the line, but they were overwhelming him. She is stealing from us, Tiffany shrieked to a woman walking her dog. She is a thief. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. Henry, I said calmly, do not let them in. Lock the inner doors. I am calling the police. They are getting aggressive, Ms. Ravenswood, Henry said, his voice tight. Your father just kicked the glass. I see it. The police are on their way. I called 911. I have a group of 7 individuals attempting to force entry into a secure building at address. They are making violent threats. I have a restraining order pending against 3 of them. I watched on the monitor as the squad cars arrived. The flashing blue lights reflected off the snow. The officer stepped out, hand resting on his belt. The clans scattered like roaches when the lights turned on. But my father stood his ground for a moment, pointing a shaking finger up at my window. He knew I was watching. He shouted something, but the glass was too thick for me to hear. The officer grabbed his arm and spun him around. After a brief, heated exchange, my father got into his car and drove off, followed by the rest of the family. My phone pinged. It was not a text. It was a picture message from an unknown number. It was a photo of my car, parked in the secure garage underground. But on the windshield, someone had placed a piece of paper. The text on the paper was made of letters cut out from magazines, like something from a bad hostage movie. Drop the lawsuit or the car burns, then you burn. I stared at the image. They had bypassed the garage security, or, more likely, Tiffany had used an old clicker I forgot to confiscate to get someone inside. This was arson. This was a death threat. My hands did not shake. My breathing did not hitch. I forwarded the image to Elena. Add this to the file. We are no longer looking at civil court. Elena agreed. This is criminal. Are you safe? Me. I have Goliath, but they have made a mistake. They think fear will make me stop. I looked at the cut-out letters on the screen. Me. They just gave me the match. The Tuesday morning sun reflected off the glass walls of Conference Room B, locally known within Vanguard Solutions as the Fishbowl. I was 40 minutes into the most critical presentation of the quarter. Seated around the mahogany table were 4 senior partners from a Japanese investment firm, men who valued decorum and stability above all else. I was walking them through the risk mitigation strategy for a merger worth $300 million. My laser pointer was steady on the projection screen. My voice was modulated to a perfect pitch of professional confidence. For a moment, I had actually forgotten about the blizzard, the freezing house in the suburbs, and the family that was currently melting down like a nuclear reactor. Then, the illusion shattered. There was a commotion outside the glass doors. I saw the receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, trying to block the path of 2 men. She was waving her hands, her face pale with panic, but she was 5 feet 4 inches tall, and the men pushing past her were fueled by a lifetime of entitlement and desperation. The double glass doors flew open with a violence that made the Japanese partners jump in their seats. My father, Marcus, stood there. He looked deranged. He was wearing a heavy winter coat that was stained with salt, and his face was unshaven. Behind him was my Uncle Jerry, a man whose primary contribution to society was a series of failed bar fights in the 80s. There she is, my father roared, his voice cracked, echoing off the hard surfaces of the modern office. The Queen of Ice herself. I did not flinch. I did not drop the laser pointer. I simply lowered my hand and turned to face them. Excuse me, I said to the investors, bowing my head slightly. Please give me 1 moment. Do not ignore me, my father screamed. He marched into the room, his boots leaving slush on the pristine carpet. He reached into his coat pocket. Security protocol dictated that I should dive for cover, but I knew my father. He was not reaching for a gun. He was too cowardly for that. He pulled out a crumpled sheaf of papers. I recognized them instantly. They were the overdue utility bills and the foreclosure notice I had sent yesterday. He threw them at me. The papers fluttered through the air, hitting my chest and scattering across the table, landing amidst the bottles of sparkling water and notepads. You think this is funny? He bellowed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. You turn off the heat. You turn off the water. Your mother is freezing to death, and you are sitting here in your fancy suit playing corporate big shot. You are an ungrateful, spiteful little witch. Uncle Jerry stepped up beside him, puffing out his chest. We are here to take what is ours. Hazel, you are going to write a check right now, or we are going to tear this place apart. I looked at the investors. They were staring in horrified silence. I looked at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. The red light was blinking. It was recorded. Security has been notified, I said, my voice ice cold. You are trespassing. I suggest you leave before you commit a felony. Felony? My father laughed. A manic, jagged sound. I am your father. I own you. You owe me everything I gave you life. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the water bottles jump. Write the check. $50,000 now. No, I said. The single word hung in the air like a gunshot. What did you say to me? He whispered, leaning over the table, his spit landing on my cheek. I said no. I do not negotiate with terrorists, even if they share my DNA. That was the trigger. You disrespectful little... Uncle Jerry lunged. He was not as fast as he thought he was. He swung his right hand, aiming a heavy, open-palmed slap at my face intended to humiliate me into submission. I had spent 3 years taking Krav Maga classes on Tuesday nights, not for fitness, but because as a woman in corporate America, I liked knowing I could handle physical threats as well as financial ones. I stepped to the left, a simple pivot. Jerry's momentum carried him forward. I caught his wrist with my right hand, stepped in, and used his own weight against him. I drove my shoulder into his armpit and twisted. It was not a movie fight. It was ugly and fast. Jerry yelped as his arm was wrenched behind his back. I kicked the back of his knee, and he crumbled to the floor with a heavy thud. I held him there, my knee on his spine, my hand pinning his wrist against his shoulder blades. Stay down, I commanded. My father froze. He looked at his brother on the floor, then at me. The bully had finally met the wall. You assaulted him, my father stammered, pointing a shaking finger. I saw it. You assaulted him. Self-defense, I said calmly, not even out of breath. Recorded in 4K resolution, at that moment, the elevator doors down the hall dinged. Goliath, my bodyguard, sprinted into the room, followed by 4 uniformed building security officers. They were not gentle. Goliath grabbed my father by the back of his coat and slammed him against the glass wall. 2 other guards pulled Jerry off the floor and twisted his arms behind him. Clear the floor, Goliath barked. Hold him, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer. The police are in the lobby. Bring them up. The next 5 minutes were a blur of chaos, but I experienced them in slow motion. The Chicago Police Department arrived. 2 officers entered the conference room. What is the problem here? The sergeant asked. Looking at the 2 restrained men, I walked over to my briefcase. I pulled out a document that Elena had secured from a judge only 3 hours ago. It was still warm from the printer. Officer, I said, handing him the paper. This is a temporary restraining order granted by the Cook County Circuit Court against Marcus Ravenswood and Jerry Ravenswood. It stipulates that they must remain at least 500 feet away from my person, my home, and my place of employment. They are currently inside my place of employment, making violent threats and attempting physical assault. The sergeant read the document. He looked at the date. He looked at the stamp. He turned to my father. Sir, you are under arrest for violation of a protective order, trespassing, and assault. You cannot arrest me, my father screamed as the officer pulled his wrists together. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and metallic. She is my daughter. She is lying. She is a criminal. They dragged him out. The entire floor had come to a standstill. Secretaries, analysts, and executives were standing in the hallways, phones out, recording the spectacle. My father, the man who cared more about his image than his children, was being frog-marched through a corporate office in handcuffs, screaming obscenities. As he passed the glass door where I stood, he locked eyes with me. There was no love left, no regret, just a pure, distilled hatred that was blacker than the bottom of the ocean. He looked at me like he wanted to kill me. I held his gaze. I did not blink. I watched until the elevator doors closed, cutting off his screams. Silence rushed back into the room. I turned back to the table. The Japanese investors were pale. I apologize for the interruption, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling slightly. That was a legacy risk that has now been mitigated. Shall we continue with the merger discussion? The lead investor looked at me with something akin to awe, but he slowly closed his folder. Ms. Ravenswood, I think perhaps we should reschedule. I nodded. Understood. They left. I was alone in the room with the scattered papers. The door opened again. It was Robert, the CEO of Vanguard Solutions. He looked at the mess. He looked at Jerry's boot print on the carpet. Hazel, he said quietly. I handled it. Robert, I said. They are in custody. The restraining order is active. It will not happen again. You handled it with incredible poise, he admitted. I have never seen anyone take down a man twice their size while wearing heels. He paused, and the air grew heavy. But this is a bank. Hazel, we trade on stability. We cannot have domestic disputes turning into wrestling matches in our boardrooms. He sighed. I am not firing you. You are too good at your job, but you are on thin ice. If there is one more incident, one more drama that touches this firm, you are out. Do you understand? Crystal clear, I said. Go home, he said. Take the rest of the day and fix this, permanently. He walked out. I stood there, looking at the city below. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold ache in my joints. I had won the battle. I had humiliated them. I had put them in jail. But as I looked at the gray sky, I knew it wasn't over. My father's eyes in that elevator told me everything I needed to know. A rational man would stop. A rational man would realize he was beaten. But Marcus Ravenswood was not rational. He was a narcissist who had just lost his audience. He would not just go away. He would escalate. I picked up my phone and called Elena. They have been arrested, I said, but they will make bail. The charge is a misdemeanor violation of a protective order. They will be out by tonight. I know, Elena said. What do you want to do? Prepare for the end game, I said. He is going to come for the one thing he thinks I still care about. He is coming to my home. Get ready, Elena whispered. I am ready, I said. Let them come. Christmas Eve in Chicago is usually a time of hushed reverence. The snow muffles the city sounds, and the lights from the skyscrapers twinkle like diamonds against the velvet dark of the lake. But inside my apartment, the silence was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a trap waiting to be sprung. My father had made bail at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I knew this because I had an alert set on the county jail roster. A pawnbroker on the south side had wired the $10,000, likely in exchange for the title to the house that my father no longer legally owned. He was free, he was desperate, and he was coming. I had sent Goliath, my bodyguard, down to the lobby to coordinate with the night staff. I wanted to be alone in the apartment. I needed the camera footage to show only one thing, a single woman being besieged by 3 intruders. There could be no ambiguity about self-defense, no arguments about a fair fight. I poured myself a glass of heavy red wine and sat in the high-backed velvet armchair facing the hallway that led to the service entrance. In luxury high-rises, the front door is for guests. The back door, accessible via the fire stairs and the freight elevator, is for deliveries and emergencies. It is also the point of least resistance. At 11:30 at night, the notification chimed on my iPad. Alert. Tamper detected. Rear service door. I tapped the screen to open the live feed. The camera, mounted discreetly above the doorframe in the stairwell, showed a scene that looked like a distorted Christmas card from hell. My father was there, wearing dark clothes that strained against his bulk. He held a red steel crowbar, the kind used for demolition. My mother stood behind him, shivering, holding a large canvas duffel bag. Tiffany was acting as the lookout, her eyes darting frantically up and down the stairwell. They were not ringing the bell. They were not knocking. They were wedging the crowbar into the seam between the door and the frame. I watched them with a detachment that frightened me. These were the people who had taught me to tie my shoes. These were the people who had taken me to see the Nutcracker. Now, they were felons breaking into my home to rob me. I knew exactly what they wanted. They thought I kept a wall safe in the master closet. They thought it contained cash, jewelry, and the deed to the house. They were right about the safe, but wrong about the contents. On the screen, my father leaned his entire weight against the crowbar. The wood splintered. I did not run to the bedroom to hide under the covers. I did not scream. I picked up my tablet and tapped the smart home controls. First, I turned every light in the apartment to 100% brightness. The sudden flood of illumination was blinding, eliminating any shadows where they could hide. Second, I activated the intruder deterrent sequence on the sound system. A high-pitched, oscillating siren began to wail from the ceiling speakers, loud enough to rattle the teeth in my skull. It was a sound designed to induce panic and disorientation. Crack! The deadbolt gave way with a sickening snap of metal and wood. The door flew open, banging against the wall. They rushed in like wolves, stumbling over each other, frantic and wild-eyed. "Find the safe!" my father screamed over the siren, waving the crowbar. "Get safe and get out!" "Check the bedroom!" my mother shrieked, clutching her empty bag. They ran down the hallway, their wet boots leaving muddy streaks on my hardwood floors. They were halfway to the bedroom when they rounded the corner into the living room and froze. I was sitting there, legs crossed, wineglass in hand. I looked like I was waiting for a dinner party to start, except for the deafening siren wailing around us. "Turn it off!" Tiffany screamed, covering her ears. "Make it stop." I tapped a button on my tablet. The siren cut out instantly, leaving a ringing silence that was even louder than the noise. My father stood 10 feet away from me, chest heaving. He gripped the crowbar until his knuckles were white. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the madness of a man who has lost everything and decided it is someone else's fault. "You," he spat. "Me," I agreed calmly. I held up the iPad. The screen was facing them. It showed a live video feed, broadcasting to a cloud server. "You are alive," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "Every frame of this is being uploaded to 3 separate remote servers. The breaking of the door, the crowbar, the intent to commit robbery." My mother stared at me, her face a mask of horror. "Hazel, please, we just wanted to talk." "You brought a crowbar to a conversation," I asked, raising an eyebrow. "And a loot bag. Stop lying. Sylvia, it is over." My father let out a roar, a sound more animal than human. "Give me that tablet." He lunged toward me, raising the weapon. I did not flinch. "The police are in the elevator," I said. "They were called the second the tamper sensor was triggered. That was 3 minutes ago, even with the snow. They are entering the hallway right now." My father stopped mid-step. The crowbar wavered in the air. "You are bluffing," he snarled. "Am I?" I took a sip of wine. "I am a risk manager. Dad, I do not bluff. I calculate odds. The odds of you getting out of this building before the Chicago Police Department SWAT team arrives are 0. Tiffany panicked. The reality of the situation finally pierced through her entitlement. "I am getting out of here," she yelled. She turned and bolted back toward the service door they had broken through. I tapped a single icon on my screen labeled Lockdown. A heavy magnetic thud echoed from the hallway. Tiffany reached the door and pulled. It did not budge. She yanked on it, screaming. "The fire doors have magnetic locks that engage in case of a security threat," I explained, as if I were giving a tour. "I control them. You broke the mechanical lock, but the magnetic seal is rated to hold 500 pounds of force. You are not leaving." "Let us out," my mother screamed, dropping the bag and running to the window. "We are on the 30th floor. We are trapped." "Yes," I said. "You are?" My father looked at the door, then at me. The crowbar lowered slowly. The adrenaline was draining out of him, replaced by the crushing weight of inevitable consequence. "Hazel," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We are your family. You cannot send us to prison. It is Christmas. You cease to be my family at Gate K-12. I said. "Now, you are just intruders." Then, the sound came, from the street below, The wail of sirens rose up through the glass, growing louder and louder. Blue and red lights began to flash against the living room walls, painting us in alternating strokes of violence and authority. We stood there in the tableau of a broken family. My mother was sobbing on the floor, Tiffany banging uselessly on the locked door. My father was standing with a weapon in his hand, looking at the daughter he had underestimated for 32 years. I stood up and placed my wine glass on the table. 30 seconds, I said softly. A heavy pounding shook the front door. Police, open up. My father dropped the crowbar. It hit the floor with a heavy, final clang. I walked past him, smelling the fear and the snow on his clothes. I did not look at him. I walked to the front door, checked the peephole to see the tactical gear of the officers, and disengaged the lock. Merry Christmas, I whispered to no one in particular, and opened the door to let justice in. The door did not just open. It exploded inward, driven by the force of a tactical battering ram that the police had brought up the freight elevator. The armed burglary in progress call I had placed, combined with the mention of a crowbar, had triggered a high-priority response. Police, get on the ground now. The command was a wall of sound, overlapping and deafening. 6 officers in tactical gear swarmed into my living room, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the ambient glow of the city lights outside. The transformation of the Ravenswood family was instantaneous and pathetic. My father, who moments ago had been posturing like a warlord with his crowbar, crumbled. He threw his hands up so fast he nearly dislocated his shoulders, dropping to his knees with a terrified whimper. "Do not shoot! Do not shoot!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "Face down, hands behind your head," an officer bellowed, kicking the crowbar away across the floor. It skittered over the hardwood and hit the baseboard with a hollow clang. My mother, who had spent her life cultivating an image of aristocratic elegance, was now lying prone on my Persian rug, her cheek pressed against the wool, sobbing hysterically. Tiffany was curled in a fetal ball near the hallway, shrieking like a banshee. I stood by the window, my wine glass still resting on the table, my hands raised calmly to shoulder height to show I was non-hostile. "I am the homeowner," I stated clearly to the lead officer, a man with graying hair and eyes that had seen everything. "I am the one who called," he signaled to his team. 2 officers moved in to secure the intruders. The sound of zip ties being cinched tight was sharp and rhythmic. Zip, zip, zip. "Clear," one officer shouted. The lead officer approached me, lowering his weapon but keeping his hand near the holster. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "No," I said. "I am unhurt." "We found these individuals attempting to breach the interior doors," another officer called out from the hallway. He was holding Tiffany's designer handbag, which he had just dumped onto the floor. Among the lipstick tubes and breath mints, 2 items stood out, damning and undeniable. First, a heavy-duty box cutter, the blade extended. Second, a piece of notebook paper. The officer picked up the paper with a gloved hand. "Sarge, look at this." He walked over and showed it to the lead officer. I leaned in to look. It was a handwritten list in Tiffany's loopy script. It read, Hazel's Wells Fargo. Try birthday. Hazel's safe. Try 1234. Social security number. It was a shopping list for identity theft. "And the box cutter?" the sergeant asked, looking at Tiffany, who was being hauled to her feet. "For the packages," Tiffany stammered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her spray tan. "Just to open packages." "You brought a box cutter to a family visit at midnight on Christmas Eve?" the sergeant asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Along with a crowbar." "It is a misunderstanding," my mother wailed from the floor, trying to lift her head. "We are her parents. We just wanted to see our daughter. She is mentally unstable. She locked us out." The sergeant looked at me. "Is that true, ma'am? Is this a domestic dispute?" I did not get angry. I did not shout. I simply picked up my iPad again. I rewound the footage to the moment they broke the door. "Officer," I said, handing him the tablet. Please watch this. This is the rear service entrance. They used a crowbar to destroy the deadbolt. They ignored the alarm. They entered with weapons drawn. And when I confronted them, my father raised that crowbar to strike me. The sergeant watched the screen. He saw the violence. He saw the intent. He saw my father lunging. He handed the tablet back to me, his expression hardening into stone. "This is not a visit," he said. "This is a home invasion, aggravated burglary, possession of burglary tools, conspiracy to commit theft." He turned back to the 3 people currently being held by his team. "Get them up," he ordered. They hauled my father to his feet. He looked old. The arrogance that had fueled him for decades had evaporated, leaving behind a scared, shivering old man. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of begging and a lingering, silent threat. "Hazel," he rasped. "Hazel, stop this. We are your blood. You cannot let them take us on Christmas. Think about what you are doing," my mother chimed in, switching tactics to emotional manipulation. "I gave birth to you. I suffered for you. How can you do this to me?" The room went silent. The police officers looked at me. It was the moment of truth. In many domestic cases, this is where the victim folds. The guilt, the history, the societal pressure to forgive family, it all weighs heavy. The sergeant looked at me. "Ms. Ravenswood, it is up to you. We have enough for the state to pick up the charges, but your cooperation makes the case. Do you want to press charges? These are your parents." I looked at them. I looked at my father, who had forged my signature and stolen my credit. I looked at my mother, who had cropped our texts to make me look like a monster. I looked at Tiffany, who had doxed me and endangered my life. And then, I thought about the airport. I closed my eyes for a second, and I was back at gate K-12. I felt the bitter cold of the terminal. I saw the departed sign. I remembered counting the calls. 1, 10, 50, 122, 122 times they could have answered. 122 chances they had to be a family. They chose silence. They chose to leave me behind. I opened my eyes. The hesitation was gone. The daughter was gone. "I do not have a family," I said. My voice was clear, ringing through the apartment like a bell. "These people are strangers. They have been stalking, harassing, and robbing me for months. They broke into my home with weapons. I fear for my life." I looked my mother dead in the eye. "I want to press charges," I said, enunciating every syllable. "I want to prosecute to the absolute fullest extent of the law. No plea deals, no mercy." My mother gasped, as if I had slapped her. My father's face went gray. "Book them," the sergeant said. "No, no," Tiffany screamed, as they began to drag her toward the door. "Hazel, you bitch, I will kill you, I will kill you." Add communicating threats to her charge sheet, the sergeant noted calmly to his partner. My father did not scream. He just stared at me as he was led away, the handcuffs clicking tight against his wrists. It was a sound of finality. It was the sound of a heavy book slamming shut. My mother was the last to go. She was sobbing, dragging her feet, looking back at the warm, beautiful apartment she would never set foot in again. "Hazel," she moaned. I turned my back on her. The officers marched them out. The heavy boots thudded down the hallway. The elevator doors dinged. Then they closed. The apartment was suddenly quiet. The siren was gone. The screaming was gone. The toxic presence that had hovered over my life for 32 years was physically removed. The sergeant stayed behind for a moment to take my statement. I gave it efficiently, providing the digital files, the evidence, and the context. "You will need to come down to the station tomorrow to sign the formal complaints," he said, tipping his cap. "Try to get some sleep, ma'am. Lock your door." "I will," I said. "Thank you, officer." He left. I was alone. I walked to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary magnetic lock. I walked through the living room, stepping over the spot where my father had knelt. I picked up my wine glass. I walked out onto the balcony. the sliding glass door whooshed open, and the freezing Chicago air hit me. It was 10 degrees below zero, but I did not feel cold. I felt a strange, burning heat in my chest. Below me, the city was a grid of gold and white. Snowflakes were falling softly, covering the grime of the streets. Somewhere down there, in the back of a police van, 3 people were realizing that their ATM machine was broken forever. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I dialed Elena. She picked up on the first ring. "Hazel, are you okay? I saw the police scanner report." "I am fine," I said. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. "It is done. They are in custody. Burglary, assault, attempted robbery." "My God," Elena breathed. "Did you press charges?" "I buried them." "Elena," I said. "Now, I want you to do one last thing for me." "Name it." "Execute the foreclosure on the suburban house," I said, looking out at the horizon. "Start the eviction process first thing tomorrow morning. List the property for sale by noon. I want it sold. I want every trace of their debt wiped from my name." "Consider it done," Elena said. "Hazel, how do you feel?" I looked up at the sky. There were no stars, just the endless, heavy gray of the snow clouds. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel the weight of it. I did not feel the crushing burden of expectation, of debt, of trying to buy love that did not exist. I was alone on Christmas. I had no parents. I had no sister. I had no one to share this bottle of wine with. But as I breathed in the sharp, icy air, I realized something. "I feel free," I whispered. "I feel absolutely free." I hung up the phone, took another sip, and watched the snow fall, finally at peace in the silence I had created. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on whether I went too far or if they got exactly what they deserved. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and give us a hype to help this story reach even more people.